We're talking freshman wide receivers when we return.
Welcome to the Devy Devotional Podcast, a show devoted to college prospect evaluation with a fantasy football focus. With your hosts, John Arrington, Aaron Wilcox, and Andy Starr. This podcast brings you actionable strategies and player-driven analysis for your Devy, C2C, and Dynasty leagues. Let's dive in.
Let's dive back into the freshmen. Welcome into the Devy Devotional, where we stay devoted to Devy. I'm your host, John Arrington, joined by Aaron Wilcox. This time, we are definitely switching back and forth between our hosts here the past few weeks, but at least we have one of them here with us today. Unfortunately, Andy Starr could not make it. He's on vacay in the heat of Florida, if you will. He had enough of the snow and ice and sleet and whatever else that you guys have up north, and he went to the beach and he said, I can't do it. I'm in Florida. And I said, I record in Florida all the time. I'm pretty sure you can't. No. So he's on vacay. He's not going to be joining us tonight. And guess what? The freshmen are not his forte anyway. So it gives Aaron and I some time to really dive in to the freshmen. Although I really did like the way that the last freshman pod went when we had Andy focusing on the depth charts, the coaching changes, things like that. So I'm not saying he doesn't bring anything to the table, because he obviously does, even when it's a freshman pod. But like I said, that's what we're going to be talking about today. Last time we covered the QBs and the running backs. This time we're going to be going to the wide receivers. If we have time, we'll get into deeper name players and things. If not, we'll save it for another pod, and we'll do it another time. You know how we like to go long, and Aaron has told me he has a hard out tonight, so we're not going to be going long tonight. But let's check in with Aaron. How are you doing? How's the baby? And are you ready to talk some freshies?
Yes, I am super excited, and no, things are well. I always get, pretty pumped up for the incoming freshmen, especially this early look. We're gonna get more information as spring news starts rolling in at some point, but for now, let's take an early look. And yes, we miss Andy here. He provides valuable insight both on the depth charts and some of just the situational analysis that we like to have. So we'll pick up the slack there, of course, on that end, and we'll get into some of the scouting that I've done and some of the model projections and all that John's done as well.
Absolutely. I think, we covered the QBs, we covered the running backs. I don't know that we were overly excited about any of the players, but there appear to be a decent amount of good wide receivers here. And I actually even went as far as to rank some tight ends. And so I have some tight ends to throw into the mix once we get into maybe not tier one, but once we get in a couple other down a couple tiers, I could probably even mix in some tight ends to the mix. And like I said, if we have enough time, we can get into some sleepers and stuff like that. But there always seems to be quite a few wide receivers that we should focus on. That being said, last year I got pretty excited about. I think everyone was pretty excited about last year's wide receiver class, and I would have to say, like, it was pretty underwhelming as a class, right? Like there were so many high end prospects. Khalil Lockett and Jerome Miles, Taylor Taylor, Quincy Porter. Um, let's see, Derek Meadows, Elijah Thomas. I mean, there's just so many guys that everyone was excited about being drafted in the second, third, maybe fourth rounds of supplemental drafts, and really not much to show for it. We went back and forth on Vernell Brown and Dallas Wilson, and it turned out they were both good. So it was kind of funny how so many of these players did not hit or did absolutely nothing, and then yet the two players we were arguing about, is it going to be this guy or is it going to be that guy? Well, it ended up being both of them, kind of.
Yeah, well, looking back at last year, definitely underwhelming production out of the wide receiver position. And I do have the top four guys here in this class. I have rated I mean, up there, if not ahead of all the guys from last year. Like, I really do like this class more. And I know it's easy to say that in hindsight, but these guys are just, for one reason or another, whether it's landing spot, talent, pedigree. I mean, a lot of five-star talents in this class. So, yeah, there's a lot to be excited for. And I will say, kind of going back to last week's podcast, check it out if you want to hear more about the quarterbacks and running backs. The top two running backs are absolute studs. They're potential home run picks. And there's quite a few quite a few quarterbacks that are very interesting in this class. And the guy that I had like in my QB 5-6 range, John as QB 1. So like there's a lot of high end talents there, and that's just I think a testament to some of the intrigue that this class has at the top at the quarterback position. But today's all about the wide receivers. Hopefully, some of these guys can get on the field kind of early. And I am curious, John, do you have like a clear one guy at the very top, or are you like me? I have four guys that I have essentially in my tier 1.
So I kind of like last year. I had one that was clear cut ahead of the other, ahead of the rest. But I would say I had, let's see, last year I had three in tier one. This time I have four in tier one. But I still have one that's almost like a mini tier ahead or whatever. Or if you want to just say tier one and tier two, that's fine. Whatever you want to say. But there are four at the top here. I, however, have Chris Henry Jr. going to Ohio State. I mean, I know I've been one of the ones the loudest about it, saying just because you go to Ohio State doesn't mean you're going to be a stud. But it's also hard to discount what they've done as a program and for recruiting. I know that the offensive coordinator isn't there anymore as far as Brian Hartline doing the recruiting and everything, but I'm sure he had his hands in this for years now, and I don't think this is just something that just happened overnight. So I just think Chris Henry Jr. 0.9918 in the composite score going to Ohio State. Obviously Jeremiah Smith's going to be heading out. Carnell Tate's heading out. We've been, like we said, Quincy Porter from last year, underwhelming. There really haven't been a lot of hits. Brandon Ennis, underwhelming. A lot of other players, underwhelming. And in fact, we've had some. What was the guy?
Yeah, Noah Rogers in the same
Noah
class
Rogers
as
transfers out.
Ennis, yeah.
Yeah, so we've had a lot of hits, where we've had some hits, we've had a lot of misses, but I think that really does open up a lot for Chris Henry Jr. to just go in and be a stud right away.
Yeah, and I don't know if you mentioned Mylan Graham there, but yeah, you go down the list and it's like, yep, a lot of busts. But I mean, think of the opportunity this year after Jeremiah Smith. I mean, it is pretty wide open. So that is certainly making a good case to have Chris Henry Jr. up there as a five-star guy, big, great frame that he can fill out and should fill out there. But he does have an injury history, and that's what I'm kind of concerned with. Like he is, I believe, missed considerable time over the last 2 years. It's like if the guy can't stay on the field, I mean, that's going to be very much detrimental to his future. But we'll see. I mean, at the end of the day, sometimes that is not going to mean a whole lot, or they can be like Evan Stewart's of the world, where they miss high school time, they go on to miss college time and never really establish much consistency and relevance. But, Chris Henry, he's been productive when he's been healthy in high school. He's good enough size, adjusted athleticism, though his raw athleticism is not that underwhelming. But again, he's a big guy who moves really well too. And he has great hands. I really think that there's some dominance to his game, and he could fill out some similar skills to like what Marvin Harrison Jr. brought to Ohio State back in the day, which is exciting. But I will also mention, while we're talking Ohio State and wide receivers, there is a guy who's been a riser in the recruiting services going to Ohio State who has now passed up Chris Henry Jr. in the ranks, actually, for just Rivals. I don't know if that's Rivals and On3 or what that service is now, but the Jerquindon Gifford going to Ohio State. Late riser in the process. Didn't really play for a great high school team, but senior year, he continued to really show out and break out more, and he's just a very solid all-around player. He is the wide receiver 2 in the class for Rivals, which I think is just kind of crazy watching him. I was not. Like I thought he was very solid, but I didn't think he was that level of polish quite yet. But I think he's a solid athlete. I think he's got the raw goods. If he can build on that, he'll be a good route runner. I think there's upside there, but the other factor with Ohio State wide receivers now is they don't have Brian Hartline developing them anymore. He's left. And, I guess we should anticipate some drop off in the development there. Obviously, they shouldn't fall off a cliff. We've seen other programs like LSU, despite coaching staff turnovers through the year, they can still churn out really good wide receiver talents. And they're still recruiting well at Ohio State.
Yeah.
So I think there's a lot of intrigue for Henry and Gearford, but I don't even know if I'm pronouncing that name right. Guilford, I guess, is maybe another way to say that. But
Yeah,
yeah, they're
Guilford.
interesting. Yeah, interesting guys there at Ohio State coming in.
Yeah, you scared me for a second. I was thinking I didn't have him in my ranks, and then I do. He's just lower. He's a .968 in the composite, and I mean, obviously he has the same thing, going for him. Like you said, there's not that much going on at Ohio State. I mean, that sounds really stupid to say, but there's just been a lot of misses. There's been a lot of guys that really haven't done hardly anything, whether you want to call it a year 1-0 or whatever it is. I mean, they just really haven't done hardly anything, and so there's just a lot of open routes open and available for these guys. But I know you said he was the RB or the wide receiver two for Rivals. I'm not saying it's perfect or anything like that. I tend to do the composite just to say, hey, I'm getting a little bit of everyone's opinion here and that kind of thing. And obviously, he's not quite up there for the composite unless it jumped up recently and I haven't adjusted, which is possible. I guess I have not updated in a couple weeks, but yeah, so I have Chris Henry Jr. there by himself, but like I said, kind of a mini tier drop from there. I have a big three. I think you said you had four as well. So let's see, do we match up here?
Yeah, I am very curious if we do match up. I'll go with my next guy. But I will say one last thing about Chris Henry Jr. and Buford or Jackendon Buford. He could be the next Emeka Bukan, and Henry Jr. could be the next Marvin Harrison Jr. type of tandem at Ohio State. I'm not saying they're going to be exact matches for those styles, but just having that 1-2 punch there once Jeremiah Smith leaves, especially after this year, they're going to need guys to step up. That's intriguing. But one guy that I have higher than both of those players at this time, just as a player coming in, is Tristan Keys going to Tennessee. And he's a guy, I think, formerly committed to LSU, but flipped over to Tennessee. I don't really love that for development, but for early playing time, I suppose, he'll get some opportunity at Tennessee, though they have Mike Matthews, they have Brandon Staley. But Keys is just so talented. It's going to be hard to have them ultimately relegate Keys to a backup role. He should be able to get on the field as a 5-star coming in. He's got really good speed on the field. 20.9 miles per hour was one mark that I saw for him at a minimum speed. This last year, he's been a good producer. Yes, he had a knee injury that affected him part of his senior year, but at the end of the day, he is just a fluid mover, dominant hands, adjusting to the ball in the air. I mean, like, he can run after the catch. He's got pretty much everything that you want to see out of the wide receiver position. He just lands at Tennessee, which, puts a sour taste in all of our mouths, because when is the last time they've really developed a guy? But thankfully, he comes in so developed into college that I think he's going to flash what he needs to flash to ultimately stick out to NFL evaluators.
Hey, we're doing a lot better than we did with the QBs. Two for two. Oh, I don't know. Did you say you have Chris Henry as your one? I don't think you did.
No, I mean, I have him kind of interchanged with Keys here. I
Okay.
honestly think that the injuries could worry me with Henry, where I could drop Henry even lower too within
Okay.
that first tier. But I mean, at the end of the day, pretty safe bet right at Ohio State versus, I mean, if we're just comparing landing spot itself, which obviously there's way more to it with these prospects. I mean, I think Keys is the better all around player. I mean, I have a
I
top end
think.
comp for him too.
Oh, hold,
Malik
hold on one
Neighbors.
second. Give it to us. Oh, did you already say? I was gonna say
Sorry,
save it
sorry.
for us. He said Malik Neighbors if you didn't hear it. But I was actually I was not gonna say Neighbors. So I'm not trying to steal your thunder here. But I was just about to say Tristan Keys, TK Keys is probably more of what we're looking for NFL purposes right now. 6'1", 200 pounds, 196 pounds, whatever he is, like that kind of thing, compared to Chris Henry, 6'5", 200 pounds. Like that's not exactly what we're necessarily looking for. Now we're not sizes here, so we're not saying, oh, Chris Henry's 6'5", so he can't possibly be good or anything like that. But I mean, just looking at what the NFL has become and like what we've been, who has been hitting recently, Tristan Keys probably sticks out a little bit better. The problem is Tennessee. This is not a program that has put out solid wide receivers, and that's why it's this slight. I told you it's a small teardrop. Like I don't even want to call it a teardrop, tear break, whatever. It is though because of Tennessee. Because unfortunately, that's the research I've done, and it's just saying, hey, he's either. I mean, according to the research, obviously anything can happen. According to the research, he's either going to fail or he's going to transfer. And even then, like the research is actually who you were recruited to. It doesn't even necessarily matter if you transfer or anything like that. It's who you were recruited to, and they're saying Tennessee just hasn't had it.
Yeah, no, I would not blame anybody by any means to use that like as a tiebreaker type of thing. But yeah, I mean he's ultimately a very high end guy, so he's going to be going in the top six ish range in supplemental drafts. Oftentimes it's two or three quarterbacks there, then the couple top running backs, and then some combination of those two wide receivers. Every once in a while, you'll see somebody else kind of sneak into that top six ish range in supplementals, or at least the early mocks and whatnot that I've seen. But those are pretty much the guys at the wide receiver position who are just sneaking into that top six.
Yeah. All right. Let's see if we can go at least 4 for 4 here. Maybe not necessarily in the exact order, but can we go with the top four? I have Ethan Feaster at 3 and Sedarian Morgan at 4.
Ooh, okay. So I have Sadari Morgan next. So
Okay.
yes, going to Alabama. Great, at 1.5 star now, just high end 4 star type of guy. He's awesome. I think that the great production, the some of the athletic testings is very solid. On the field speed is actually even better than what TK or Tristan Keys had. Sedarian Morgan, he's got some pretty good juice there, and he's got the size, he's got the route running hands. I mean, I love it. I know he's not going to Ohio State, he's going to Alabama, but Morgan, he would be like that Carnell Tate type of guy, at least in my mind from how he's playing the position. But I have him at 3. So you said Ethan Booby Feaster.
Booby
That's
Feaster, correct.
yes,
Yes.
yes. And so Feaster, he's I don't know what to do with them. I have like a mini tier break.
Oh no.
I have him like at 5. So I really,
Oh,
really do
okay.
like him. Yeah, I really do. So I'm like, he could go in my tier 1, but I'm a little bit concerned if he's going to be the next USC guy or another guy in the same class ultimately ends up outproducing him. But now he's awesome too. I mean, I think that he's a little bit more raw to his game, but he's super physical. Like he's blocking dudes. He's running really hard. He's got that long striding speed. He looks like George Pickens out there. Booby Feaster is, I mean, elite name, and then he's a high end 4 star guy, almost 5 star, and he's coming into college early too. So he is like Ryan Williams. He's coming out 1 year earlier than he needed to, or I guess should have, or whatever you want to say.
Yeah, I mean, you're talking about multi-sport athlete, reclassified. I guess, we can't really say is that good or is that bad. I guess what we can say is they have more time. So like even if it is a bad thing, like we've seen Ryan Williams not necessarily do what people were hoping in years 2 and 3, or year two, I'm saying, and so hopefully he can fix it in year 3. But I mean, even if he didn't, okay, so he comes out as a senior and he's what 20, like like, there's worse things in life. So I don't, I guess it gives him more time. But once again, I don't know if it's a good thing or a bad thing. I'm just looking. I mean, there's really no one who is there at USC now. There was no one there. It was Makai Lemon. It was the Makai Lemon show, and it was no one else. People love Jacoby Lane. Wait, what did Jacoby Lane do? Like that was more of a, we hope that he can do something at some point. Deuce Robinson obviously left. There really just hasn't been that much, and I'm sure I'm sure there was some decent prospects last year and things that maybe will step up this year. But once again, looking at like Ohio State and everything, these are players that did not do anything or much of anything last year. I mean, we have Tunic Hines, but there's definitely more. There's more mouths to feed, than just Tunic Hines. It's gonna be okay.
Yeah, and they do bring in Terrell Anderson, who's a pretty solid player, but by no means a superstar at least at this stage in his career, right? But I think he could certainly start there and put up some resistance to a freshman coming in and like dominating from day one. But that doesn't mean that Feaster won't get a nice role. I mean, I certainly could see that his freshman season. And yeah, I mean, I think Tanook Hines is kind of promising as well, but again, not a for sure thing. He's just intriguing, right? But again,
Yeah.
not a star proven at this point. So yeah, no, I mean, I like the Feaster shout out. The guy who I have though, so my number four and a tier one type of guy in this class is actually Jalen Lott. I don't know if you were going to
Oregon,
go that next. Yes, Oregon guy, five
my wide receiver
star.
five.
There we go. So we're pretty similar here. So he's a five star. I honestly could move him higher, but I'm a little bit concerned about will he get on the field and get a pretty big role right away at Oregon because they have Jamari Johnson, tight end. They have Decorian Moore, also talented five-star wide receiver from last season. They have some other depth guys there that don't really scare me, but is Jalen Lott going to is he going to be like ready for the college level too? Because he's kind of a thin player and he's going to put on mass. Absolutely. He is just a very, very good athlete, clearing 21 miles per hour. Speed wise, his track times are good. He's a great jumper in track too. His high school production was solid. He's versatile and I think he's just got a lot of explosiveness to his game, and I love seeing that out of wide receivers, especially nowadays. So they can win underneath, but they can also win deep. I mean, if he's just a screen merchant, we don't want that by any means. But I have some pretty lofty hopes and some comps that I think play style wise that Lot you or could I guess play similarly too. And so I'm very intrigued by Jalen Lott. He could easily break that year 1-0 and then be a pretty significant long-term contributor there for Oregon. Is he going to get enough volume this year? Is he going to get a lot of looks? I guess I can't guarantee that though.
So this is where it's tough, especially with Fresh Bath, where I'm not looking at any statistics. I'm not really looking at anything. Obviously, I can read profiles and try to make decisions based on that. But the way that I created Fresh Bath is you're kind of looking at thresholds, and Jalen Lott is a 0.9898 in the composite score. So he is what is it? Let's see, point two ten thousandths of a point away from being a 0.99. And if he hits that, he would actually jump up to my wide receiver or being tied for my wide receiver two in the class if he was a 0.99 instead of a 0.9898. Now, the reason why I mean, obviously, I can make that change. I could just say, hey, he's a 0.99 instead of a 0.9898. And I could make that change and he would be my wide receiver too. The reason why I didn't is Aaron and I are not big Dante Moore fans. And so I said, you know what? I'm going to look at the context of the actual situation here. And I'm not even necessarily saying Lott doesn't have the talent or anything like that. I don't know that the quarterback has the talent. And so that's why I'm leaving him here at five. Now, this is not me killing him or saying he's terrible or anything like that. I'm just putting him at five instead of putting him at two. I don't really want to overdraft the Oregon receivers. I would much rather take the value if he falls to me at wide receiver five. I will be very happy. If I were to take him at two, I'd probably feel a little uncomfortable.
Yeah, I agree with that. Like ranking him highly there in that tier one does not mean I would draft him at like wide receiver two or yeah, in the top six of supplementals, for example. But he can fall a little bit later than that in drafts, and that's when I like starting, yeah, to take some shots on Jalen Lott. And yeah, at the end of the day, I mean, I guess the Oregon situation right now, we don't love it, but I mean, who knows? Dante Moore, one more year at Oregon, and they could really kind of open up that passing game a bit more. And again, another year of development for Dante Moore as well. There's certainly a chance he'll pass the ball a little bit more than he did last year. They graduate Whittington, and they retain some obviously talented backs there at Oregon, so they're still going to run the ball. But anyways, there's reason to think that okay, maybe the Sadiq and exit of Benson, and again exit of some running backs will help pave the way to more passing opportunities. So I do have a drop off after that. Is that the same for
Yes.
you, John?
Yep, I have a tier break after Lot, and then I have what I would say 3 to 5 ish players.
Okay. Yeah, I have a pretty
I kind
big
of like a
tier,
tier.
but
I mean, it's is it a big tier?
yeah, pretty big for me. I mean, I could cut it off at a few different areas or a few different spots, but it's turning into just kind of a big tier for me after that. Not, I
Well,
mean, not
so
huge, like six guys maybe.
I have I have 2 wide receivers, and then technically like a mini tier break, and then I have my first tight end.
Okay, okay, very intriguing.
All right, let's see. I don't. I wonder if you're going to be as excited about this next player as Fresh Beth is, because once again she's just following the schools, she's following the research and all that kind of stuff. I want to see. We were pretty good, 5 for 5. Maybe not in the exact same order, but we were 5 for 5 for the top five. Can we be 7 for 7? My next 2 wide receivers, Caden Dixon Wyatt going to USC, and Naeem Burrows going to Clemson.
Ooh, nice. I have those in my top 10, both of those guys. So I
Ah.
like them. The order, yeah, I know, a little different order. Little, I like this flavor a little bit more. You like this other one. Yeah, I'd love to talk about those guys because I think, Burrows is super fun. Like probably the most explosive guy that we've talked about so far from like a track speed time standpoint and from like his explosive high school production. He's playing defense out there in high school too. Like he
Mm.
flashed a lot to his game, but he is a little bit smaller, like 5'11", 175. Again, how do I feel about guys coming into college when they're 5'11" at the wide receiver position? Like could they be shorter and smaller than that? Sure, but at the end of the day, like he will slide into that Antonio Williams role. Naheem Burrows should be a slot weapon right away for Clemson. I don't see any reason why he doesn't break year 1-0. And I know we like TJ Moore. I know we like Bryant Wesco, assuming that Bryant Wesco is healthy, but there is still room for Burrows, and especially long term. I have some concerns for the Clemson quarterback position, too. That does make me a little bit more skeptical that we'll see big things anytime soon there, especially for like the wide receiver 3 or so on the depth chart. But Burrows, again, is slot only option. I'm going to bring something up that JJ Zacharyson actually talked about recently on a podcast, but it's the slow death of the slot wide receiver at the NFL level and how 12 personnel and some of the things that they're doing to bring more tight ends, more size onto the field is coming at the expense of these slot only guys. And I'm not saying Burrows can only play that slot position, but I'm just saying that he mostly has his experience playing as an underneath receiver. His size makes me a little bit more skeptical of that expansion of his role as a wide receiver. So those are some reasons. Again, I know the NFL, ebbs and flows, right? Trends come in, and he could certainly be drafted into a system that uses a lot of slot heavy looks. So I'm not going to try to say, oh, he's slot, I don't want to draft him. But that's just another reason for me to say I have a few other guys slightly ahead who have a bit more versatility with their size and projection.
Yeah, I gotta say, obviously, Clemson. We love some of those receivers that they have right now, but they're moving on or should be moving on, hopefully. And there's definitely time for a freshman to take his place. Running a 10.64 in the 100 meter. He's got speed. Maybe he doesn't have ideal or perfect size or anything like that, but I'm hoping that he can be more. Last year, and I'm definitely not comping the players. These players better than I do. But last year we had similar conversations about Vernell Brown, and like could he be anything more than just a slot receiver and that kind of thing. And I'm not saying that he even was, but we were saying can he even get on the field? Can he even be in that role? And then he did. He was the wide receiver one for Florida. I don't think that's happening with with Naheem here, but at the same time, I think that he can at least get on the field. And like you said, at the very least, be Antonio Williams. I'm not a big Antonio Williams fan. I don't think you are either. I know there are some people out there that are. I think he could be better than Antonio Williams because I'm reading the profile and it's talking about route running. It's not just speed. It's not just you have the route running along with the speed, and that's when I kind of fall in love. And then Dixon Wyatt. Just once again, pretty wide open or fairly open at USC, and you have a consistent you have consistency going on with your quarterback at least this year and things like that. So, give me a player that can get onto the field in year one, do something with a solid program, and that's why I have Dixon Wyatt there. But it is a teardrop from that top five for sure. Now you said you had those guys in your top 10, but not necessarily next. Who do you have at 6 and 7 then?
Yeah, no, I'll get into my next guys here for sure. But I think Caden Dixon Wyatt, like I said, he has the opportunity there. He's rivals wide receiver 4 and 247's wide receiver 6. So you see some of the other recruiting services kind of causing him to be potentially a bit lower in the composite, but a very, very solid guy. And Ohio State had him committed for a while. So him flipping to USC, I mean, he must think that he's going to get some opportunity there. He was teammates with Chris Henry Jr. in high school, actually. So therefore, the production was kind of limited for Dixon Wyatt, and I came away a little bit underwhelmed because of that. But again, at the end of the day, I think he's a very, very solid all-around receiver. Reminds me a little bit of the what's his name, JoJo Trader coming out of high school. I believe he was teammates with like Jeremiah Smith, and like
Yeah.
he looked good because Jeremiah Smith was such a stud out there, and he was just good enough, obviously, to get some good high school production. I wonder if there's a little bit of that with Caden Dixon Wyatt, but anyways, he's a good player. I still have him easily in my top 10, and I actually think he comps kind of well to a guy we already mentioned, Bryant Wesco. On this
Ooh.
podcast, so yeah, but yeah, I think Dixon Wyatt is the like cheaper option if you want to get a piece of the USC wide receiver room. If you don't want to draft Ethan Booby Feaster, highly in your drafts, maybe you can wait a little bit. You can't wait too long, but Dixon Wyatt would be next. Just like you can kind of wait for Gifford if you don't want to draft Chris Henry Jr. in the top like 5.
Fun fact: Bryant Wesco and I just lost his name. Caden Dixon Wyatt have the same exact grade in Freshbeth.
Nice, nice. Okay, I like that comparison. Now my next guy, because you were curious, like who else would you have high here? Well, is a 5-star wide receiver 3 overall in the class for rivals, Corey Barber, LSU wide receiver. So not only is he going to powerhouse for wide receivers, LSU, and keep in mind, yes, there's some turmoil, some turnover there with the coaching staff. Lane Kiffin's bringing in a ton of wide receiver talent, but at the end of the day, that school just churns out the wide receiver talent. Lane Kiffin also does as well. In his days at Ole Miss, think of all the wide receiver talent that's come out of there too. And so Corey Barber, a little bit better size, 6'1.5", 180 plus pounds. So a little bit better than Burrows, for example. He doesn't have the same like testing speed, but on the field speed looked awesome. Bursty, agile, and I liked a lot of the things that he brings to the table. Like I think he'd be a good route runner. He'll replace some of the things that Jace Brown will likely do for LSU this season. So do I think that Barber is a stud this year? No. I think that's why I can't have him higher. Like I wanted to even have him maybe like 1 or 2 spots higher, but I just can't because I mean, where's the path to just dominance as a true freshman at LSU this year? I don't really see it with how much talent they're bringing in the transfer portal. But again, at the end of the day, like, can he have some touches like a Malachi Tony or a slot guy or Casey Concepcion did early in their careers? Absolutely. I'm not saying he's like those players necessarily, but I think he can at least get some of those touches, if nothing else, and then build out that total wide receiver package here in the future. But there's always that risk of year 1-0 when there's a lot of depth and competition there.
So I have to admit, I said I haven't really updated this in a couple of weeks. I didn't think there was going to be that much change in a couple of weeks, but I'm sitting here going, man, I have Barber pretty substantially lower. Now I do have some tight ends mixed in, so obviously that's pushing him down even more than just the wide receivers would. but I actually went to 247. I went to the composite. His composite score has changed in a matter of weeks, and it changed substantially. It went from like a 9 or 0.9615 to a 0.9739. That's a pretty substantial difference, at least in my scoring system. It moves him up another tier. And so, once again, like this is, I'm trying to be as upfront and clear about this. I'm not trying to act like I know these players like the back of my hand. I'm just saying I have a system and it works out pretty well. But that being said, I was a little lower on Corey Barber until you just mentioned it. Rechecked the score. He is now tied with Caden Dixon White and Naheem Burrows in the same exact tier. So you said you had him at 6. Basically, I could say the same thing, or so, at least right around there now that his and that makes me wonder if I need to check in the other scores or if that was one like that was like a late update or I don't know.
Yeah, it's kind of a late update, I believe, and there's a few other guys who have kind of shifted, like Gifford going to Ohio State, so I'd check that one out too, I suppose. But
Okay.
again, I think some of the other recruiting services are more skeptical, so maybe it didn't change that drastically. But another guy that I'm very high on in this wide receiver class is Davian Grosh, who is going
He's
to
next.
Florida. Yes, I mean he's super fun. He's a state champ in the 200-meter dash, really great times. Also in the 100 dash events, and senior year really exploded as a wide receiver with some awesome production. He's just a threat after the catch. So in some ways, I mean, I think he's a better player than Corey Barber, even, or at least has higher upside. But I'll say that Florida, I mean, he's so blocked there right now. I mean, because they got what, Eric Singleton, and we mentioned Vernell Brown, and they have why am I Dallas Wilson, and those are like a very good top three.
And no QB.
Yeah, like what? How is the path to breaking out going to be there for Grosh? I don't know, but just get the ball in his hands, and actually, I think you'll see that he breaks year 1-0 because he has all the tools, and he can even be utilized like as a backfield threat. I mean, there's some versatility there for sure. He needs some route running nuance development. I mean, that's not there. I actually think that there's some similarities to like a Luther Burden type with him, which I know not John's number one player there, but I think that the ceiling is very high still with Grosh. But when we have to talk about ceiling and saying he's not there yet, it makes you kind of wonder in a situation like Florida that's already crowded and kind of uncertain.
Yeah, that one's gonna be tough. He is my next player, but I have to agree with you. Um, every once in a while, if I just think there's too many players that couldn't possibly see the field, I will make a small manual adjustment in these. And I could see, I haven't done it, but I could see a reason to do that. I don't know. It's saying trying to reconnect. I don't know if I lost if you lost me or I lost you, but could you hear me?
Yeah, absolutely. I can still hear you.
Okay, cool. But yeah, so I don't know about if he's going to be able to see the field like you said. I also have another wide receiver tied with him, and then I'd like to get into my first tight end if you will let me. But first, the wide receiver going to Miami, Samorian Wingo, a 0.9716 and going to Miami, like we've seen Miami. We are big Darian Mensah fans. We are big. We've seen Miami what they've done, especially in the transfer portal era. I mean, is there a team that's done more in the transfer portal than Miami since this happened? I don't know that there is. So I mean, I guess obviously like Indiana did a pretty good job, but I don't know that they've made more moves. But like there's been some solid moves. But Miami is like, hey, we're gonna bring in a different guy every single year. So yeah, okay, we think Mintz is going to the NFL next year. That's great. Who do they bring in next year? Now they bring in
Yeah.
Hussein Longstreet or somebody, or whoever it is, and next thing you know, you still have a stud. So I I really like the landing spot. Obviously, we can't say even though they are bringing in these QBs, I don't know that they have some powerhouse, wide receivers or anything that we have to like truly freak out about. Obviously, people are going to say Malachi Tony. Malachi Tony is a very very one trick pony right now, very much so. I'm not saying he can't become more. He was a true freshman, a very young player. He could absolutely become more, but right now he is a one trick pony, and that's not really stopping anyone from going out there and getting on the field and doing their own thing.
Yeah. No, I'm glad that you mentioned Samaria Wingo because then I can get to the first disagreement that I have with you in this wide receiver podcast so far because we've been agreeing a lot, way too much, right? And,
Probably.
and yeah, not even saying that Samaria Wingo is a bad player by any means because I think he's pretty good. He's in my top 15 wide receivers in this class, but I know it's not saying a lot, right? I mean, but I'm pretty high in this wide receiver class. Wingo's solid. I think there's some underwhelming athleticism there. I don't think he's great with the ball in his hands after the catch. And I wonder if, I mean, he honestly reminds me of Elijah Surratt, though, in a lot of ways. And I know that's like, a great sleeper in this class and somebody that we kind of like, especially John has highlighted him on the podcast before. But I actually like Milan Paris more, and he's a wide receiver going to Miami. He's pretty highly rated as well, and I just saw a little bit more there from him as that tall outside receiver. He can really complement what they have there in Miami, and I think that you mentioned Darian Mensah going to Miami. I think he's going to need a great outside threat, and I think he can really flourish with a Paris. I think Paris fills some roles better than Wingo does, but at the end of the day, I know there's some red flags with Paris, or not even red flags, but like he was a high school player in Ohio. Like, I mean, he was super productive, but at the end of the day, like it's in Ohio. So, and he played, I want to say on like one side of the field, like the left side of the formation all the time. When I was watching him, he needs to move around the formation, right? He needs to develop, but I think his upside as a really tall and fluid receiver with great route running abilities and hands. I think Milan Paris could be like a Tet McMillan style player, which is awesome. I mean, you don't see those big guys move like he does that often. Does he get on the field for Miami? We'll see. I know they bring in a lot of talent, like you said, transfer portal wise and otherwise. They want to win or get to another championship, and I commend them for that. I think these young guys, though, Samorian Wingo, Paris could certainly be part of that kind of regrowth at the wide receiver position for Miami.
Well, I mean, you completely stole my thunder there. I said I was going to bring up my tight end one, and then you start talking about the tight end Milan Paris. Unfortunately, and I'm 100% joking here, but unfortunately, he's 6'5.5", so he cannot hit in the NFL. It's not as a receiver. He would have to transfer to the tight end position. We know that players over 6'5" cannot hit in the NFL as a wide receiver. So yeah, there's just a lot going against Milan Paris here.
I know he's got a tough road, but if that height is 6'5", 6'4.5", I mean there's plenty of guys right who are there. 6'6", now that's where we start getting into like KJ Duff territory, true outliers that we have some hope for. But yeah, no, we'll see. I mean, I think that Wingo does have a little bit more stereotypical like solid size versus Paris is really really big. Um, But I do have one more guy in this tier that I don't know if you have anybody else, but I do need to mention him for sure.
All I have is a tight end, so shoot, and then I'll get into my first tight end of the night.
Yeah, and this guy has fallen. Unfortunately, he tore his ACL early on in his high school senior season. So he's fallen in the recruit rankings, understandably, but he once had a 5-star rating. Very much a statistically impressive junior producer. And he's just an awesome mover. He's good hands, ball skills, everything that you want to see out of a decent sized receiver. And that's Jace Matthews. And Jace Matthews going to Ole Miss. And I think there's some opportunity there. Jace Matthews has been very high. Like some of the guys at Campus Decatur are still big fans of him, like top 5-ish in the class, I believe. And so I don't have a great comp for him. I really don't. But I think that there's something there. Again, with his play speed, I don't think it's elite by any means, but what he does with the nuance to the position, he can make a guy miss. He can run all the routes that you ask him to do. I mean, those are intriguing things for a guy coming into college, and somewhat opportunity filled Ole Miss room with all the exodus that's happened there for that team.
Yeah, I have a pretty big tier here after Wingo that you could really throw in quite a few names, including Milan Paris is in there, Jace Matthews is in there. And then I'm sure there's probably some other wide receivers that you'll be listing as like a tier break from there, but they're in that mix. So I'm not that far off from where you're at. I think there's a lot to like about Ole Miss. I mean, there's also a lot of ambiguity, and there's a lot of change at Ole Miss as well. So we can't necessarily say. I guess they are getting Chambliss back, or most likely, or I guess that's one good thing, but that's for 1 year. That doesn't necessarily help him long term, and we don't know exactly what they're going to be able to bring in or do beyond that. So I can't say that it's the perfect situation, and that's how I have it graded here. It's a decent situation. I would even say a good situation. It's not the perfect situation for him to go into, and that's why you have a guy who's a .95, in the composite, and and going to a decent situation. It's like, okay, yeah, he's in that like tier break, maybe tier three kind of guy that I'm not gonna like freak out about going and drafting, but I definitely wouldn't hate to have him on my squad, get him in the supplemental either. But that brings us to we'll get into that the rest of those wide receivers in that tier, but in the tier ahead with Gross and Wingo, I also have Ian Premier out of Notre Dame, tight end out of Notre Dame. Obviously, I have to mention that he's a basketball player because he's a tight end, so I have to mention that he's a basketball player. Obviously he has the size. He's coming in as a true freshman, 6'5" and 220 pounds. Going to Notre Dame. Notre Dame has been like quietly having some tight end talent and even some wide receiver talent recently, some running back talent. Like Notre Dame has kind of quietly become a solid squad. And it's not that they've never put out great players or anything, but I don't know that we can ever say they put out the level of players that they've been putting out recently. And now today, Dane Brugler put out a mock with Malachi Fields in the first round of the NFL draft. It's just a mock. I'm not saying it's happening, but just the fact that he's even being mentioned by like an insider like that in the first round leads you to believe that he's probably going to go at least in the first 2 rounds, right? Something to that effect. Once again, we can't guarantee anything, but you're talking about that. You're talking about Eli Raridan, who was basically an afterthought. Missed multiple years because of injuries and things, and yet he's still being kind of pushed up boards and mentioned in rookie talks and things. And I keep seeing him at least in NFL context, even though he was like an afterthought. So now go get a 5-star high end recruit, throw him into that mix, throw him into what they're doing at Notre Dame. And I mean, he already has a first round projection from Gabe Brooks at 247. Throw in the fact that he was a basketball player, and yeah, I mean, we're what, one, two, let's see, we're 9 players in, and I'm throwing out my first tight end. But that's when I feel like I'm willing to take him in supplementals. Okay, we're at wide receiver 9. I'm taking Ian Premier.
Yeah, I have no qualms with mentioning him in this conversation. He's a pretty awesome player from everything I've heard. Just have not had a chance to dive deep into the tight end, so I think you did a nice job highlighting Premier there, but don't have anything to add yet at this time. And that's a lot of tight end talk for this podcast. So go us.
Yeah, that's more than we've probably ever done. But like I said, I had a few players left in that next tier, and I actually have another tight end, and it's probably the last tight end I'll talk about. I promise. There's a couple other names I could mention, but I probably won't. So, but there is one more tight end, but I want to see if we're matching up or can get back to matching up on these other wide receivers you have not mentioned in my tier yet. So, who do you got?
Ooh. Well, I do have a guy. He's not even really considered a wide receiver strictly in this class, though. He's like an athlete, 5-star athlete, and that's Jermaine Bishop. So I'm hopeful that he will end up playing the wide receiver position. He's 5'11", 155, and so that's a really small weight. But 5'11", I mean, at the end of the day, yeah, I mean he's not too far away from where he needs to be. Like from a height standpoint, he just needs to put on some weight, and he reminds me actually a lot of what they were getting in Xavier Worthy, like a very diminutive guy but awesome speed. His production is insane. His senior year, Jermaine Bishop went for 120 receptions, 1,900 plus yards, and 20 touchdowns. And he also ran the ball for 400 some yards and 8 touchdowns. So, I mean, that's over what, 1,300 total yards between reception or receiving and rushing. I mean, it's just insane. So again, I think he is a comfortable slot weapon for a team, and you don't really have to pay up for him in most drafts from what I've seen. So just don't think he's the most developed guy yet. So he needs to develop there. That's why he's not higher for me by any means. And there's no guarantees that he does play wide receiver, but he just, I don't know. He's a great, speedy, finesse guy. Needs to develop that game, yes, but he offers something that I think Texas will covet, and Arch Manning could certainly make some use out of, just with some explosiveness. So he's there in that tier for me, but he could be lower. I have no qualms with moving him down like 3, 4, or 5 spots here.
You know what? We talked before how, I was kind of all over that was it Bussy, the athlete from a year or two ago, and I just don't know what to do with these athletes, man. Like unless they're almost guaranteed. I think there's been a couple of times where it was like a player was listed as an athlete, but they were basically guaranteed that they were going to be running backs or whatever it might be. We don't really have that guarantee, so I feel like unless I have that, I'm just going to kind of hold off. And so I don't even have him ranked right now. Maybe that's a mistake. Maybe it's not. I don't know. But you start talking about an athlete with the smaller size and this and that, and it's like, well, he's obviously. I don't think he's going to be a running back at 155. So there's not much he can be unless he switches, some other position or something like that. So yeah, I do not have him listed. I really can't even talk to how I feel about him. I just can't say. I guess I have a bad taste in my mouth with the last couple of athletes that I have ranked.
Yeah, no, and that's fair. But we do get some really good steals sometimes at that athlete position that just, they kind of fall under the radar because they're looking through the wide receiver, the running back ranks, whatever the case is, and they don't see them there, right? So they just become forgotten or not really thought about, especially in early supplementals when the ADP is not that well developed or just pretty shaky. I will say that Legend Bay is another guy, Ohio State athlete coming in, who is a very high 4-star athlete. People kind of love his athleticism, and I get that. Like his speed, his track speed, he ran a 10.2. I know it was wind aided, so I mean wind to his back helping him out, but still, that's pretty insane. But the issue with Legend Bay is you mentioned Terry Bussey. He is exactly like Terry Bussey. He has unknown abilities. He played quarterback. Like he just is not a wide receiver. He's just an athlete out there. And so, could he be a Paris Campbell? Could he be a Curtis Samuel? Those are some comps specific to Ohio State where I could see Legend Bay getting some touches. But is that really something that we want to invest in? Like we've just seen so many issues with banking on total like question marks. Oh yeah, he'll learn how to play the wide receiver position. Now, you should have been learning that in high school. And I'm not saying that, again, like we should blame him or whatever the case is. Like, that's a coaching thing, I guess. But, yeah, Legend Bay is a guy that I will probably have no shares of because I'm just not willing to rank him in, like, the top 15, 20 wide receivers in this class. There's just too much unknown there. So I assume that he's not on your list either, John?
Yeah, I didn't put any athletes in my list, so like I said, I guess I'm a little hurt from the last year, and so I'm just like, nope, I'm done. I'm not doing it this year. And the funny thing is, I actually have a same rule with the next player on my list. I think I'm going to drop him down as I'm looking at it. I have the same exact rule. I'm not doing it again because he's going to Georgia. I'm just not doing it again. Craig Dandridge, not doing it. I just don't care. They do not develop wide receivers. They cannot develop wide receivers. Even the ones that have gone to the NFL and done anything, a la your Lads and your Pickens, they barely did anything when they were in college, and we had question marks. Can they do it? When they make it to the NFL, all that kind of stuff. I want nothing to do with them. He's like technically my wide receiver, like 11, I think he is. And honestly, I want to just drop him to like wide receiver 19 right now.
It's funny that you mentioned wide receiver 19 because he's my wide receiver 18. And it's not because I hate the guy. Like similarly to you, I kind of want to like him, and then I just see that George was there, and I don't know, I struggle with it. And he's the thing is, if he had a college ready frame, like he could play in the SEC from day one, like he's a built guy, I would feel differently about him, right? But he's not like he's 170 pounds. Maybe he's a little bit more coming into college. But do you think Georgia's going to run him out there and have him block on plays and be a feature part of the offense year one? Like at 170 pounds? Craig Dandridge, yeah, there's a lot to like with him. With his speed is solid, his production is impressive. He's fine as a route runner. I mean, I think he's functional there and has reliable hands. But I mean, I just don't think he's physical and dominant enough. So Dandridge, I want to like him. I still have him in a solid place where I'll draft him in supplementals, but he's got to fall a good ways, and he might be falling to other people, right? He might not end up falling into my lap in drafts.
All right, so I wonder, I just said, hey, like Danders was my next guy, but I'm not doing it. Georgia, I'm just done with them. I'm done with the school. I'm not doing it. Then this next player is kind of breaking my rules because I would normally say if a player's going to Syracuse, I want nothing to do with them. And yet Calvin Russell is a good enough prospect that in fact he's a 5-star prospect on 247. He's a 4-star prospect, like a mid 4-star prospect in the composite. So obviously somebody's bringing him down. One, at least one of the services there is bringing him down. But he's actually a 5-star 98 4247, 6'5", 195 pounds, going to Syracuse. Once again, I do not like the fact that he's going to Syracuse. I don't like the fact that he's going to school that we really don't see a lot from. He's a multi-sport athlete, basketball, track, football, I mean everything. He's got the size, he's got the speed, he's got like just about everything that you want, but he's going to Syracuse.
Yeah, so I like Kevin Russell a lot. Some similar feelings to Milan Paris, who's going to Miami. Like they're both just super tall guys, and I think Kelvin Russell he needs to develop his frame more. He's going to play basketball at Syracuse as well. I'm always a little bit questionable, right, when those guys are, dual sport athletes. I don't know. I mean, is that going to lend itself to really the dedication and the putting on of mass and all those things that Russell severely needs, being so skinny. But when you go to his talent, I mean, his movement skills are awesome. And I think as a senior, he seemed to have more physicality, at least better contested catch abilities, all those things that you need. So, I mean, he's a guy who I think the eventual progression could be like a Drake London type, but he needs to get bigger. He needs to get more physical, and he's not there yet. So, is Syracuse the type of program to develop a elite type of wide receiver prospect? I'm there with you, but I do have Calvin Russell. I actually just moved him up just past Paris. So, wide receiver 12 in the class for me. And yes, he's a tier after some of the guys we talked about earlier. But yeah, I mean, Russell, I'm pretty intrigued by, to be honest. I don't know what to make of it. Like, he's what, wide receiver 2 for 247 Sports, did you say? Or at least that's what I had. That's really high, 5-star. So
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, think of like that's a value in the third round of drafts. You can get a 5-star wide receiver. Just don't reach for him because there's certainly, I mean, there's a reason why we have them where we have them, and that some recruit services are saying, wait, no, this is not lining up either.
Yeah, but I will say it's very interesting. Multi-sport athlete, and then they also played him at QB a little bit and DB a little bit. So I mean, I just think that's showing at least the DB part is showing me some athleticism that maybe wouldn't normally expect from a 6'5" guy. Now, like you said, maybe he needs to work on his frame. He needs to work on, the certain things to be a 6'5" guy in the NFL, but he's got plenty of time to do that. So I think I'm right there with you. I'm pretty sure he's my wide receiver 12 as well. So I'm right there with you on that one. We are right at the hour mark, and you gave me a hard out. So I have a couple other names, but I'm gonna let you. Actually, I have one more name because you said Jace Matthews and Milan Paris. I have one other guy tied with them, and it's Aaron Gregory out of Texas A&M. How are you feeling about Gregory there?
Yeah, I have him a little bit lower. And I think that's a theme that I just hate these Texas A&M guys that you seem to like in this class because I was the same way at the running back position, and I'm kind of there with Aaron Gregory. Like he's in the 20s for me. Just think that he's too thin. The production scored. I guess I don't know. I was a little bit confused about the production in high school based on what I was seeing there, and I just don't see much nuance with him. I don't see anything special with the ball in his hands, and yeah, I'm a little bit skeptical. So at the end of the day, he's not bad. He's in a pretty big tier of guys who are intriguing there for me in the 20s. So again, that maybe goes to why I like this class because I think they're solid high end talent. There's also some good mid to lower tier talents, still in the 4-star range. So I don't have him quite as high, but I do have like a Jabari Mack, LSU, and a Chase Campbell, Texas Tech, up there pretty high as well. I think Chase Campbell, he could have a year one role. And yeah, I mean, he could be a big time player, absolutely. And then Jabari Mack for LSU, you got to mention high end recruits going to LSU. And he has 10.87 track speed, but he's got solid size. And his senior year production, I'm not really sure on, but his junior year production I saw was very solid, like 22 yards per reception, 1,200 plus yards receiving, 14 touchdowns. There's some intriguing aspects to his profile on paper. It's just when I watched him, I was a little bit like, is this guy like the next Caleb Cunningham or Jonathan Mingo? Like, that's kind of where my mind went, which are not good comps by any means, like not favorable types of players to project him to be like. But again, some solid production going to SEC school, high end one at LSU, 4-star. He's got some athleticism, size going his way. Yeah, might as well just mention Jabari Mack for sure.
I actually don't have him ranked. I'm gonna have to get on that and see. I think I cut it off at like 0.94 or something like that, and that was probably too early to cut it off. I could probably do a little more work. Like I said, I'm gonna go in and make sure I doubt the one player that I changed earlier. Who was it? Dixon Wyatt or no, Corey Barber. Yeah, I doubt
Yeah.
Corey Barber is going to be the only change. Although I have gone through and as we've been talking about these guys, made sure that their scores like was still lined up, and I haven't seen any other ones that that haven't. So I don't think it's like a drastic change throughout the composite scores or anything like that. Um, and but yeah, I don't have him. I really don't have anyone else that I truly care about. You start getting into a lot of players, in the lower levels or going to teams that I don't necessarily care about, that kind of thing. But I did promise I was going to talk about one more tight end, and so I'm going to talk about Mark Bowman going to USC. We've already kind of talked about how it's fairly wide open there at USC, especially for the tight end position. You have a lot of you have a lot of consistency there with the coaching and the QB and all that kind of stuff for year one at the very least. He's a player who reclassified, but I guess he was already older, and so even though he reclassified to a new a better year or this year, I should say, he's still 18, so he's not really like one of those young players or anything like that. It's gonna be, oh yeah, he's 17 or anything like that. But he's a big 18. He's 6'5", 225 pounds. Obviously, he can grow into that frame and do a lot with it. And they're just, I mean, they're comping him to Trey McBride. Obviously, going to the system that he's going to. They're talking about like how he's one of the most like pro ready tight ends that they've seen, and this and that and all that kind of stuff. 0.9863 for the tight ends for the composite score, and I'm like, hey, you're going to USC, you're tight end here. Like, I'm not gonna draft you in my top 10 or anything like that. But you start getting into that Dandridge, Russell range, like that kind of thing, and I'm considering Mark Bowman at that point.
Yeah, I've heard good things about Bowman as well, but who knew that John was the tight end guy, the tight end stand for the
Guru,
Devy?
if you will. I
Yes,
actually have
there you
two
go.
more names. Screw it. Kendra Harrison and Caden Prothrow. I said I wasn't going to say anything about Georgia, but I will talk about a tight end going to Georgia because that's probably the one thing you can talk about is a tight end and Caden Prothrow going to Georgia. Yeah, those are two players that are also not that far behind Bowman that I would be willing to draft. After that, you could almost forget tight ends. There's other names, but no one that I'd be overly excited about.
Fair enough. Good work here tonight, John.
Thank you, sir. Anyone obviously we haven't really gone into the sleepers, and we could probably just do a full sleeper episode. But is there anyone that you have to mention tonight?
No, no. At the end of the day, I think there are some other guys who are sleepers in the class. We could talk about them separately because we didn't get that deep into some of the quarterbacks and running backs last time.
Right.
And there's a few more names for wide receivers. So there are some, but no like must have, must mention guys. I've mentioned some of my sleepers. I haven't really gotten into my sleepers at the running back position, so I'm excited to share those
Yeah.
with you guys. But yeah, nope, that was a good summary of the top end wide receiver options.
No, I agree. I think we even went a little deeper tonight with the tight ends. Obviously, you were having some connection issues and things that night, and so unfortunately, that didn't help us get deep in the quarterbacks and the running backs and all that kind of stuff. So I think we will have a chance to get into some sleepers and have some fun with another freshman episode. But hey, we got a whole long off season. We're going to talk all this stuff, and especially the way that we've been mixing it up. Hopefully, the listeners like it. We're not trying to confuse anyone. We're trying to put out the best pods they're topical and that we can do with the right people, the right things, and all that kind of stuff. Get it out in a timely manner. And so, next week I can't guarantee we'll be talking about freshman sleepers. Who knows what we will be talking about? But I promise we will be talking about something. And so that's what we do. We talk about Devy football. Speaking of which, Aaron, really quick, any words of wisdom before we get out of here?
So the class here is a pretty fun one. I will say that some words of wisdom. I know we fall in love with these guys every year, so understand that there are going to be some other values in supplemental drafts, some guys who have a little bit more proven flashes production. So definitely consider, the freshmen always being so fun and exciting. You want to be the first guy and on them and have them for their entire college career because they could blow up and be the next Jeremiah Smith or absolute stud, right? But so many of them do flop. So I guess we talk about it enough, but there are ways that we can fine tune our hit rates, but they're still kind of low at the end of the day. Be open to having, plenty of guys in, fair tiers instead of saying, no, this guy's for sure going to hit. No, we can't say very much for sure with freshman players.
Those are some wise words of wisdom. I don't know if I mentioned or not, but I said Kendra Harrison. I don't know if I mentioned he's a tight end going to Oregon. I know Aaron is going to get very excited. We know how he feels about those Oregon tight ends. He gets very, very excited about them. But that's enough about that. We appreciate you guys listening. Please like and subscribe wherever you can. Check out the Gridiron Ratings YouTube channel, and we will be back in your ears as soon as possible. But for now, we're gonna cash out. See you guys.